بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى خصوصا على سيد الرسل وخاتم الأنبياء وعلى آله الأزكياء وأصحابه الأتقياء أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والذين جاهدوا فينا لنهدينهم سبلنا وإن الله لمع المحسنين صدق الله العظيم. One of the most apparent realities of life is that every individual, every single human being has their own set of challenges that they are dealing with in any given moment. As a parent, when my child comes to me and says to me, "Baba, I'm having a rough day," or "Schoolwork's been tough," or "Quran memorization has been extremely difficult," it's almost my knee-jerk reaction to dismiss him because he's a child. How difficult could his life actually be? This is because I refuse to accept that the challenges that he's facing are about him, and there is no need to compare them to what I'm going through in life. As an adult, as someone who has a responsibility to provide for a family, my failure doesn't only impact me as an individual, it impacts multiple people. So when I look at this child who isn't responsible of anyone but himself and is complaining about failure or struggles, I tend to dismiss him thinking it's not a big deal. Why are you crying over it? But my dismissal of that person in that moment, when that person is really struggling, it belittles them and makes them become very small in their own eyes. Every human being is going through their own unique challenge. We think of the story of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, and I mentioned this as an introduction to my second point. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam described Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu as one of the very few people who accepted Islam without asking any questions. But then I turn to the Muslim community today, and we look at the youth of our community, and not only the youth, let's talk about the adults of our community. And people questioning Islam has now become the norm. So there is this big question that is questioning Islam, is being skeptical of your faith, in contradiction to the legacy of someone like Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. And the simple answer to this is, it is not in contradiction to that legacy. Because Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu, the trust that he had developed was a result of what he had seen with his own eyes in the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because he had met the Prophet of Allah, he knew the Prophet of Allah, he heard the Prophet of Allah, he knew what kind of person Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was. As for the people who haven't met Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Islam that we have today was passed down to us by people. And whether we question our faith or not is heavily dependent on how much we actually trust those people and how great those people were in delivering Islam to us. What kind of Islam did they offer to us? What medium did they use to deliver the deen to us? Because being Muslim in America is very complicated. On one hand, you're trying to fit in as a minority at work and in school, and it's very difficult. You're challenged with your identity every day because there are things that you have to say to people, I can't do. My deen limits me. These are parameters set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I can't cross them. Yet on the other hand, we have loyalty to our deen. We have loyalty to our culture. Making these two things work is very difficult. And then the Islam that we see in our communities today, unfortunately, not too many people are interested in following or teaching an Islam to the next generation of Muslims that is true to Islam. Rather, they are interested in a faith that is true to their culture. So there's a Palestinian Islam, there's an Egyptian Islam, there's a Pakistani Islam, a Bangladeshi Islam, a Malay Islam. So now you have young people in the community that are trying to figure out what it means to be an American, a minority immigrant American, and then also trying to figure out how does Islam fit into this picture. This discussion is very delicate yet extremely important. One of the great scholars from the subcontinent by the name of Sheikh Ashraf Ali rahimahullah ta'ala, he was someone that had many keen observations. He studied human beings and societies. And he said that I've studied human beings very carefully, and I see that most human beings fall into one of four categories. There are those people, most people fall into one of four categories in relationship to Islam. So he said, I've seen Muslims fall into one of four categories. There are those that he says their practice of Islam is deen mizaji. And what that means is they will practice Islam as long as it coincides with what they already conceive to be true. They've already made their mind up on a political issue. They've already made their mind up on a celebratory issue. They've made their mind up on a scientific issue. So they're willing to work with Islam as long as Islam agrees with what they believe in. But if Islam has something else to say, Islam needs to take a hike. And then there are the second group of people. He calls them deen riwaji. These are people whose faith is more or less dictated by culture. So I'm willing to practice Islam, but it's going to have to be in agreement with the culture that I come from. When I was imam in Chicago prior to moving to Dallas, there was a couple that came to visit me at the masjid one day. The mother and father said, you know, Sheikh, our son is now at the age of marriage and we are interested to help him find someone. He found a girl and we met the girl and we don't like her, so we don't want him to marry her. Can you please tell our child not to marry the girl? So I sat with the young man and I said to him, look, I'm not here to tell you who you can and cannot marry. I'm not even saying you need to take into consideration what I have to say, because this is your choice. You know the person, I don't know them. But what I will say is, whoever you choose to marry, my sincere advice is try your best to get your parents on board. Their dua matters. Barakah will come from there that will benefit you for the rest of your life. But then I said to him again, I'm going to let you decide how to handle this situation though. Whether this is the right person or not, you're going to have to figure that out. A few months later, that same young man came back to the masjid with his parents, and he says to me that I ended up not marrying that girl because I gave it some thought and I realized that she actually wasn't right for me. My parents were correct. But now that I have found someone that my parents are happy with me marrying, I'm telling my parents that this is how the wedding is going to be, and my parents are saying very openly that there will be a dabka at the wedding. We are going to dance and party. So can you tell my parents now that Islamically they should not do this? So I called the mother in and I said to her, you know, a few months back you asked me to give your son Islamic advice and I gave it to him. He acted upon it. Today he's asking to do the same back to you. So my Islamic counsel to you is that you should not have this specific type of festivity in your celebration. And the mother's words to me were, she says, Sheikh, I wanted you to teach my son Islam. I don't want him to become a sheikh. Like, calm down you're turning my son into some super sheikh. I want him to practice Islam, but only that part of Islam that I agree with. Not your version of Islam. You're not the mom. You didn't give birth to him, I did. So this is the conundrum. Now this young man, you can imagine the look on his face that all of his life his mother has been telling him Islam, Islam, Islam. But now that he's telling his mother that there is a clear injunction from the God that you taught me to prostrate in front of, that mother is now in defiance and he can see through the hypocrisy. Confused. Wildly confused. What's going on here? And this is the experience that many Muslims in America actually have. They struggle to understand, how does any of this make sense? How does it make sense? Pair that with the fact that many of us lack in basic Islamic education. There is an illusion of knowledge in the world that we live in because of open access to information on the internet, where I can read a few posts here and there and follow a few accounts on Insta and Snap and wherever else that people get their information from these days. So there's an illusion of knowledge. But underneath that knowledge, when you ask people, how far have you actually studied Islam, there really isn't much there. And then within those models of Islamic education where children are trained to a degree that is somewhat respect-worthy, it's absent of any spirituality at all. I say this to my wife all the time regarding my own children. We are not in the business of making our children into scholars. If they want to study the deen someday in their life, that's a decision they're going to have to make. I'm not interested in having my kids memorize a silly number of textbooks. What I am interested in, though, is teaching them how to have good character and love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Parents always, they come and say, look at my child, he's 9 years old, memorized 15 juz. Well, alhamdulillah, I'm really happy for you. But I want you to tell me whether those 15 juz were beaten into the child's heart through oppression and shouting and screaming and dealing with a frustrated mother for the last 3 years of their life that they're scared to the core of their existence, at the cost of beating the Quran into them. You beat the iman out of them. What good did that bring you? If anything, it might be a case against you on the Day of Judgment. Find me community leaders, parents. Find me elders in our community who are willing to teach the ummah to love Allah, and I will pat them on the shoulder. But unfortunately, the human mind is distracted. So busy with information, thinking that somehow information itself changes human beings. What a naive approach. If we will continue to think this, go and study, go and look at the last election cycle. There is so much information clearly documented that conversion from one political party to another political party rarely happens on the basis of facts. It rarely happens. There is something deeper that you have to connect with human beings on. You have to appeal to their humanity. And that's when they're willing to change their perspective or willing to take on a sacrifice. Being Muslim in America is such a beautiful opportunity. It's such a great opportunity gifted to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We stand in a land that gives us freedom to speak as much as we want to whoever we want. Mark my words, this conference right here with these people in that bazaar couldn't happen in most of the Muslim countries of the world. And here we are today gathered with our opportunity to speak our truth and call people towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, allowing people to walk in from different walks of life. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you an opportunity, never squander it. So those of us that are mentors and teachers, we need to rethink our approach. What's going on here? Everyone's complaining about people leaving Islam, but not too many of us are actually asking the real question, why? And what can we do about it? Everyone assumes that people are leaving Islam because the opposition has a better argument. Well, that's absolutely not true. Muslim scholars and theologians have written books that are so sophisticated to deal with the most sophisticated arguments raised against Muslims and Islam for over a millennium. And they're proud to do so. Go read the works of Razi and Ghazali. Go read the works of, people like Imam al-Qurtubi and his tafsir, and look how carefully Zamakhshari and his tafsir, look how they deal with people that have questions against Islam, how they answer them. These people were confident in their faith. Most of these doubts don't come as a result of people not being intellectually convinced, even though there are a group of people who need that, and there's another discussion for that. But a lot of it has to do with the way the deen was delivered to them and the logistics and implications of practicing that religion. There's a logistical issue. Every human being has their circumstances. When you see someone struggling, never assume that they're disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a vacuum. Every person is where they are in their life as a result of the circumstances where their life have led them to. And without being able to understand that today that a person that is divorced, today a person that is struggling financially, and someone whose child is defiant, and someone who's struggling with their education, and another person who doesn't have a place to live, and someone that's standing at the road crossing and standing with a cup in their hand and asking you for money, if you would think that they just woke up one morning in that horrible situation, that is you dehumanizing their struggle in life. You have no place in the solution, to be honest with you. I'm sure they're not interested in taking help from you anyway. But rather, if we can humanize these people, and understand that the reason why, one of the many reasons why young people struggle with their iman is because the mass curriculum that is being taught in public schools from the East Coast to the West Coast of America has no place or name or mention of God in it. Teaching them Islam is now something that we have to do in addition to the life that they've dedicated themselves to 8 to 9 hours a day in their educational environments. It's a whole new approach now. There's a whole new mindset that needs to be developed. People are being taught that A and B equal to C, or this process plus this process gives you this outcome. The Muslim curriculum always emphasized that all of this was possible because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it possible. Science in reality was an understanding of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed things to exist. But today's modern study of science is how things exist despite Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These issues have to be addressed. My time is limited today, and this discussion is without doubt one that requires a lot of thought. Remember that the challenges that we face, in particular young Muslims in America face, are great. Before you become preachy, the first thing I suggest is to sit down and try to understand what's going on. These cultural barriers that we've placed, we have to understand that every time we make the halal inaccessible, people will then turn towards haram. When marriage becomes difficult and it is now something that costs $80,000, $100,000, people will just resort to zina instead. وَلَا حَوْلَ وَلَا قُوَّةَ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. When we talk to people, understand that your job is to present what you can in the most empathetic and sympathetic way possible. Having that sympathy and that empathy, sitting down and understanding and asking them what led you to where you are in your life. And then when you talk to them, rather than sitting in front of them as a preacher, sit next to them as a sibling, as a friend, as a companion. And then begin to share your words while making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing that guidance lies in His hands alone. Because Nuh alayhi salam's son left Islam and he was not a Muslim when he died. And Abu Talib was neither a Muslim when he died. This must have hurt their hearts, but it was a message from Allah that guidance doesn't lie in your hands, it lies in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But lastly, and this is probably the most important thing that I have to say tonight, if you are in a position to talk to someone that is struggling, whether it's with their faith or otherwise, you must understand through and through that change in their life will not occur on your timeline. People will change when the pieces of their puzzle in life line up. Your job is just to be there available for them as life begins to make sense for them. If you force people to bring change on your timeline, first of all, that's extremely arrogant. But you may end up being very gravely counterproductive. This goes to every mother who's struggling with their child, every husband and wife that's struggling with their spouse. When you're knocking on the door every day, salah, 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 I want you to continue saying that, but I want you to ask yourself, why is this person not praying salah? What's the reason behind this? And if you give a little thought, you might find a more creative solution than banging your hand on a wall and shouting out that it's prayer time, because clearly that's not working. If the solution that you've come up with is ineffective and it hasn't worked for the past year, repeating that same experiment again and again while expecting different results is the definition of insanity. Creativity. Think, how can I solve this? I had to choose this for my own children in my house. Raising 4 of them, every time it was salah time, salah, 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 I realized I didn't want to live like this. So I asked myself, why do I think my kids aren't praying? And what I realized, at least in their case, their lack of prayer or their laziness in prayer was not due to their defiance of Allah. Rather, it was because they were distracted and lazy, because kids don't have the concept of time yet. So whenever salah time comes, instead of telling them salah, 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 I found a new solution. The solution was, when prayer time comes in, I call my kids and I say to them, Beta, kya waqt hua? What time is it? And they'll tell me what time it is. Then I'll say, namaz mein kitna waqt baki hai? How much time left for the next prayer? And then they'll tell me, Abba, there's 1 hour left. And then I'll say, theek hai, mauqa mile namaz padh lo. When you get a chance, pray. They pray. Because the problem that was bothering them no longer exists. Be creative. Be thoughtful. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to be mindful, to be wise, and he inspires us with divine wisdom so we can be there for one another to support each other in our times of difficulty. Wa sallallahu ta'ala ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.